Welcome everyone to Dr. John Bedker's Leadership Podcast, the podcast focused on leadership. The episode will begin shortly. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the podcast.
Welcome everyone to the Dr. John Bedker Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, John Bedker. We're going to focus today on the political and cultural legs of the organizational stool. We're going to do this by talking about an exemplary leader, a person who has had to confront this political and cultural challenges throughout his life, both professionally and personally. Those of you that are regular listeners will already have this word picture of the organizational stool in your view. But for new listeners, well, again, welcome. We're really pleased you're here. But let me just do a quick review so that you too can have that word picture in your view. So we're going to think about a three-legged stool. That's the image, a three-legged stool. The legs of the stool are first, the business, the organization, the enterprise, the institution. Wherever you serve, that is the first leg. Now this leg certainly is critical. You must, let me underline that, must run the business. Whatever the good, the product, or the service that you provide is unquestionably critical to your leadership success. But often forgotten and seldom given similar time are the other two legs of the organizational stool: the political leg and the cultural legs. So in our world today, a turbulent world, often polarized, these two legs pose critical function and stability challenges for every organization. And I'm going to argue certainly in your organization. They cannot be dismissed. We also can't deny that they're present. This idea of avoidance behavior is not a place for leaders. We must recognize and maintain awareness about these two important, and I'm arguing critical legs of the organizational stool. So I've mentioned this idea many times about the three-legged stool, and again, for you new people, again, this might be the first time. For leaders, though, facts, the truth, and serving to the best of your ability those in your charge. This is what we are all called to do every day as leaders. As I regularly share in this podcast and public events, doing the right thing is the essence of leadership. So telling that truth, being grounded in facts, and treating all, not some, all, with dignity and respect are not just words. These are what leaders do. It is their reason for being. So that's the quick review. Leadership, envisioned as a three-legged organizational stool. The legs, the business, critical. The culture within your organization, critical. And the politics in this day and age, these turbulent times we're living, that third leg, also critical. Today I'll speak about an exemplary leader, one of the very best basketball players ever. But he was so much more. He was and remains an exemplary leader in our turbulent times. I'm going to talk about Bill Russell. Bill Russell was the center for the Boston Celtics. He was central to the Boston Celtics basketball dynasty. Now, some of you may not be keenly aware of his name and that history, but if not, he was one at the very top of the basketball world and of the basketball players for a long, long time. Bill Russell was born in West Monroe, Louisiana. Already his story begins to reveal itself just by saying where he is from. A very tall, black man from the South, rising to become one of the greatest basketball players ever in Boston, Massachusetts. In 2017, Bill Russell was given the NBA Lifetime Achievement Award. It was the league's first time ever given. Sustained excellence over a long period of time was what this award was all about. This is a key descriptor of an exemplary leader. Let me say it again. Sustained excellence over a long period of time. Let's talk about that just for a moment here. Bill Russell has 11 NBA championship rings. Yeah, more rings than he has fingers. 11 NBA championship rings. Exemplary leaders demonstrate a myriad of competencies. In the case of Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, another great center, said at Russell's Lifetime Achievement Award presentation, and I'm quoting now, "Combining a point guard's quickness with a big man's size, Bill's talents refined the sport. He showed how basketball can be won from the defensive end of the court, using his mind as well as his body to outthink and outsmart opponents." Let's unwrap that for just a second. Think of your leadership core competencies. Another metaphor here. How many arrows are in your leadership quiver? Can you bring multiple competencies with excellence, as Bill Russell routinely did, to your leadership practice? So this descriptor by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar about all these different and diverse talents, these competencies, think about that in terms of your leadership. And again, the metaphor that I'm sharing is arrows in a quiver. Think about yours. Bill Russell inspired others. There, another leadership competency. Inspiring others. It's been widely documented that Bill Russell inspired Bill Walton, another great basketball player. And he inspired Bill Walton at a very young age, 9 years old. Bill Walton is quoted as, here's a quote, "Russell didn't score the most points, handle the ball all of the time, or demand the ball in the post every possession. Russell cared about nothing except winning," end quote. This Bill Walton quote tells us more about this exemplary leader. Not for self, but for others, for the team. It's all about winning, succeeding. Not about self. It's certainly not about self-aggrandizement. These are exemplary leadership traits. Bill Russell was the ultimate team player. Think about that in your leadership journey. A leader is also measured by how they respond to events throughout their life. In the case of Bill Russell, one may say on and off the court. His selflessness and spirit to do the right thing is a lifetime highlighted by Bill Russell's civil rights advocacy. On and off the court, he sought and was a civil rights advocate. For this, his lifelong efforts, he was awarded the 2010 Presidential Medal of Freedom. Remember that as leaders, folks. Recognize those that stand up and do the right thing. Here's another Bill Walton quote. Bill Russell was challenged by evil too many times to count. End quote. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, Bill Russell grew up in Monroe, Louisiana, a place, sadly and tragically, where racism was a very real part of everyday life. A story is told about the Ku Klux Klan coming to his home in an attempt to kill his grandfather. Shots were fired in an attempt to kill his grandfather. This is a child growing up. So racism was absolutely in his life. But not just then, and not just in Louisiana, not just growing up. It was unfortunately a tragic constant in Bill Russell's life. Bill Russell was the only black player when he came to the Celtics. Restaurants would turn him away because he was black. He had racial slurs shouted at him during games. People broke into his home in Massachusetts and sprayed the N-word on his walls. Holy cow. One of the greatest NBA players of all time had this off-court experience playing for the Boston Celtics. Well, let's talk about that time playing for the Boston Celtics. Attendance in the Boston Garden, where the Boston Celtics games were held, was a problem in the early years. The Celtics ran a poll, try to understand better how they could increase attendance at the games. Here's a statistic for you. More than 50% of the fans polled answered, quote, have fewer black guys on the team, end quote. Yeah. Well, Russell responded that he was going to refuse to let the fans' bigotry, evidence of their lack of character, harm him. He says, as far as I'm concerned, quote from Bill Russell, I played for the Boston Celtics, the institution, and my teammates. Think about this type of personal experience where people are trying to oppose you, thwart you, challenge you in absolutely bigoted ways. They want you to not succeed. They want you to not be there. And yet this exemplary leader said, I will not let their bigotry and their evidence of their lack of character harm me. That is another mark of an exemplary leader. Bill Walton and Bill Russell had many, many talks over the years. Russell was really a mentor and later a teammate to Bill Walton. Walton said this of Bill Russell, quote, he lives a purpose-driven life. Here's a man who has been mistreated because of the color of his skin and is a man who has overcome the evils of racism, who has overcome the ignorance of discrimination because of the color of his skin. And here's the clincher. Walton states, and Bill Russell is this towering pillar of strength, principle, and of humanity, end quote. So in the face of racism, civil and social injustice throughout his life, Bill Russell persevered. His quest for excellence was undeterred. Really capture that, folks. Hear that in your leadership journey. That quest for excellence, for doing your very best. We all have limitations. We're all missing arrows from that quiver. But giving all that we have to the best of our ability to do the right thing. All right, so let's talk about what he did on the court just a little bit in the face of this lived experience of being a very tall black man from the South, of getting to the NBA. Let's talk about some of those undeterred moments. He won the NBA record. He holds the NBA record, 11 championships. He was awarded the Most Valuable Player award 5 times. He led the NBA in rebounding 5 times. He made the All-Star game 12 of his 13 seasons. He only missed the one because he was not present for part of the season. Where was he? He was on the 1956 Olympic basketball team. So he missed the season and did not get elected as an All-Star. What did he do then at the Olympics? He led the United States to the gold medal that year. And then came back and guided the Celtics to their first NBA title just months later. As a college student, he led the University of San Francisco to 2 consecutive national championships and to 55 consecutive wins. In the NBA, the Celtics trusted him, Bill Walton, to own the most critical moments of the biggest games. Here's one more quote. When the game was on the line and the ball was up for grabs, Russell had no equal. Red Auerbach, the coach and architect of the Celtics dynasty, wrote in his book, On and Off the Court. Of all these winnings and championships, Russell captured 2 of them at the end of his playing career as the Celtics player coach. And he's in the Hall of Fame as a player and as a coach. He was the first black coach in the 4 major North American sports. He was part of the NBA's first starting lineup with 5 black players. He was a 2-time consensus first team All-American in college and a 2-time college player of the year. So, what do we have? We have a whole incredible list of achievements. A person who was absolutely one of the greatest basketball players ever. But it is that backstory. It's that who Bill Russell really was and who Bill Russell really is. In the face of bigotry, of racism, of person and people trying to thwart him, to degrade him, to remove him, he said, no, I will not allow these people with a lack of character and bigotry to stop me. He continued his quest for excellence on and off the court because of who he was as a human being, as a person, and as I think we have made clear today, an exemplary leader. Many of the greats idolize Bill Russell, and rightly so. Many of us that have had the opportunity to watch him, either live or on TV, know of what I have spoken today. But when you understand who this person is, their identity, because of that backstory, their lived experience of being a very tall black man in a world unaccepting of others, Bill Russell is a model for us all. Do the right thing. Be undeterred by others who try to thwart you, who have bigotry and a lack of character. Do not lower yourself. Rise above, as Bill Russell did. And we do all of this, folks, because this organizational stool, let me come back to the beginning. The organizational stool, three-legged stool, all these legs need to be of the same length, if you will, get the same amount, level, and degree of attention. Any one that gets less, or none at all, will make that stool wobbly, will make it insecure. It may not be able to perform its function. So, as you think about your organizations, and running that business is absolutely critical, do not forget the other two very important legs in these turbulent times. The politics and the culture. What is going on beyond the business, the politics and the culture? Okay, so there we go. I'll leave that with you today. This is a great story, I think, about an exemplary leader who has done so many exemplary things. And I mentioned certainly some of the recognition, but it's really that person. And it's so great for us to have these examples. All right, everyone, take care. We will talk soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Dr. John Bedker's Leadership Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please tell your friends, and, of course, please follow our podcast and subscribe. Thank you again for tuning in.